Oh God, we long for your presence in our lives in times when we feel so uncertain about our individual and collective lives, both within this congregation and in the wider culture and world in which we live. We live with so much uncertainty, and yet you are a God who promises not only to lead us into the future, but holds the very future in your hands. And so may we trust, may we deepen our faith through engaging with one another this morning, trusting in your spirit that guides and holds and gives us strength and courage for living in this time in which we are called to live. And grant that we would be patient and loving and caring with one another, listening deeply to not only the words, but also the life that wells up underneath those words in our hearts this day. Through Christ we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and we're delighted to have you in this conversation this morning. So as I said a little bit just a moment ago, this is a session that the Adult Education Committee decided to launch this year because we are anticipating our first Michigan Avenue Forum, which is coming up on Thursday evening at 7 p.m. It will be done by live stream, very much like we do our congregational, our worship service on Sunday morning. And we will be hosting a panel of 5 participants who will lead us through that time on Thursday evening. Let me tell you who is going to be a part of the panel. I will be moderating the panel, so I'm going to do it in a way kind of like the presidential debates where my back is to the camera. So I'm not a particularly, I don't mean to put myself down, but my role is one of facilitating and not being a speaker. And the panelists that will be part of that evening are our pastor, Shannon Kirshner, then the president of McCormick Seminary, David Crawford, who is also a church member. I'm sure many of you know David. And then Otis Moss III, who is the senior pastor at Trinity United Church of Christ. Bishop Forster-Smith, who's a MD, as well as a pastor of the Apostolic Faith Church, and then the Reverend Dr. Ozzie Smith Jr., who is the pastor emeritus of Covenant United Church of Christ. So these are really wonderful and amazing church leaders in the Chicago area who will be physically in our building, though we will not be having an audience in the way that we have for other Michigan Avenue forums. We'll be having an audience virtually. I think somebody needs to mute, if you don't mind. I'm hearing a little feedback. I don't think it's me. So,
Lucy, if you would like to make me co-host, I can be the mute police.
okay.
It was Karen. I could tell because she lit up.
What do you, Tim, if you want to do that while I'm just talking for a minute more, that would be fine. Thank you, Colleen. So that is our panel. Some of you have asked whether it will be recorded. It will be recorded. So if for some reason you are not available this Thursday at 7 o'clock, at some point following the evening presentation, and I'm always hesitant to say exactly when, but shortly after, it will be available to view, or if you want to repeat viewing it, that will be an option. So we're very excited about it, and especially, I mean, the world in which we're living right now, when we imagined this Michigan Avenue Forum, we thought of really 3 areas of major engagement within the culture over the last 9 months since the pandemic showed up in February, March, and that was certainly COVID-19, some of the economic fallout and challenges following that, and also then with the death of George Floyd and all of the Black Lives Matter and all of the responses to that, not only Black Lives Matter, but other responses to that. We've been holding a lot in our hearts and in our spirits over these months. So that's been the focus, and then certainly the events of the last week, which I realize are focus political events. And I know for some people, politics and religion are sometimes they're a little hesitant to step over in that, but we are at a time in this culture where there's a tremendous amount afoot, no matter your political affiliation. And so today we wanted to provide an opportunity for us to give some time for us to speak together about these issues. So so Jim Garner, who is the chair of our Adult Education Committee and a wonderful leader within the congregation, and I are going to just guide us through this. We are not the last word on anything here, but we wanted to guide us through kind of where we're going. So Jim, I'm gonna, if that's good enough for what I wanted to do, this part, do you want to just give an overview of kind of how we're gonna structure our time together?
Certainly.
And then we'll go from there, and I will
Good.
mute.
Yes, we're going to kind of two sessions here, talking first about the COVID article we sent out and some of the points the writer brought up in Christian Century, doing a breakout session from that with everybody, groups of 4, and to discuss her points and your reaction to those points as faithful people. Do that for about 20 minutes and then move on to the article about the church in South Minneapolis that was sort of a hot spot during the George Floyd riots. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll have a breakout room with that and discuss it, and then come back and share some of the points that were brought up if there are salient points you want to bring up. There's a lot to cover. We can't cover everything. I hope people can keep an eye on your reaction as a person of faith and not the details of the events, the too much personal reflection to it, especially with the COVID. That's going to be hard, but I hope we can bring it as people of faith coming together with God to unburden our hearts and examine these questions. So first off, do people know the articles that we sent around? Did you see that on the web that those were there? And did people review them?
I read some, but not all.
Okay.
And if you do, Jim, I think it's fine. We're going to give some kind of key points.
An overview of them, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Good.
So the first article on COVID was called "What If COVID Changes Nothing?" And this pastor from Ontario was examining our kind of general ideas about this. Our first reaction, and this article was written in July, so this was in the beginning of our lockdown and all our troubles with this. How did we, I know what, I made this a PowerPoint. Hold on a second. Let's do it. Let's do it, shall we? Okay. Now, there's my graphics, really exciting. In many people, there's a desire for us to get back to normal. Back to our daily routines, of course, but also to get back to the way our lives used to be. It's on people's minds. It's probably not believable that we could get back to that. Just to rewind stuff, life doesn't happen that way. People have also been saying that we'll be different after this, which is something that's said after most tragedies. We all said we'd be different after 9/11. We'd be different after the shootings in Sandy Hook. We said we'd be different after this and this and this. Every event is like that. It's a social, I think, balm that we put on ourselves that we will change, because we can't go through this much trouble without some kind of change. Will we be stronger? It's sort of like, what was the country like before World War II and after World War II? People suffered a lot, people went through a lot, and for all those sacrifices, you would think there would be changes. But the author has one clarifying statement saying, the most terrifying possibility is that this pandemic won't change anything in any lasting way. Because we said we want it back to normal. We want to we know we'll be different. We know we'll adapt our culture. We know we'll adapt our consumption. We know we'll adapt our cities and our towns. We'll adapt our politics, because why couldn't we? Why would we not do that with this kind of trouble? But the author's point is that we probably will not make any lasting changes. We said it before, and we say it, and we've said it now. However, this is an effort for us as Christians to examine this and realize we are completely bound with one another. We are bound as a society. We are bound to each other, so that the individualistic way we've been living, or the slightly individualistic and not broader thing, is not sustainable. This is nature having her say with our lives. This is a natural virus that came up. It is transmitted so quickly with each other. It is just it is nature coming up and swatting us down to tell us that we can't live our lives blindly, that we are connected. The pastor who wrote the article said that God has made it abundantly clear that we are on this planet as beings who are inextricably bound to one another. If we try to live as if we can choose to override these bonds of relationship, then we should expect life to go off the rails like this. And then she brings up the idea of apocalypse, because people have been saying, downtown looks like an apocalypse has happened. The streets are bare. We're all stuck at home. We are living in fear as if it's an apocalypse. She points out, as most of us might know, that apocalypse does not mean destruction. Apocalypse means unveiling, a reveal to God's bigger plan. And it's a pulling back of the curtain on current times to describe the spiritual truth of what is happening. And her point is, horrifying and beautiful truths are being revealed to us in these apocalyptic days of COVID-19. We are seeing the injustices in our healthcare system. We are seeing we see that in Chicago, just with the openings of the schools coming up, that certain zip codes have very low infection rates of COVID. Others have very high infection rates between schools and school districts. We can't ignore that kind of disparity and inequity anymore. Back that one up. The seemingly entrenched routines and systems of our collective life can be, I'm gonna back up one. The seemingly entrenched routines and systems of our collective life can be upended in a moment when it becomes clear we have an emergency on our hands. She's saying that all the discussions we've had about how can we protect the planet, how can we do these, how can we address inequity in our society, how can we do these things? It's bigger than what we can handle. We have to put it off till the next generation, kick the can down the road. But as we've seen with COVID, when people get together, when governments organize and people do their civic duty, there are many things we can do to work as a collective action I'm sorry, I'm freezing up here. It's not impossible. There are things we can do when we have an emergency like this, which eliminates a lot of negative thinking about, oh, we have pushed that down the road. We'll worry about that in the next year, the next fiscal year, the next presidency, the next life. We'll worry about those kind of the things we are called to solve. We'll worry about them some other time. She also points out, physical distancing makes unavoidably clear a truth that our rampant individualism we would rather ignore. There is no way to live merely for ourselves. I think that can be no more Christian statement than that I could think of at this moment. Physical distancing makes unavoidably clear a truth that our rampant individualism would rather ignore. There's no way to live merely for ourselves. And her point at the end of the article is there's nothing that frightens her more than things would get back to normal. For things to get back to normal, we were wasting this opportunity, but it also waste our chance to look at this and look at ourselves and what we've done in the face of this crisis and how to move forward as Christian people. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to it that they read? I think this is just an overview. I think the real discussions will happen in our breakout
Do
groups.
the discussion in the groups. I think that'd be
Okay.
good. And then we can pick it up when they come back.
Let me stop the share. So I'm going to break people out into the groups now.
Jim, how long will we be in the groups?
I think about 6 minutes.
Okay, 6 minutes. It's quick. So just
Yeah.
know that, there's a lot to say. Just give yourself, try to be focused.
And what are we to do in our groups?
I'm sorry. Good, Roger. The next slide will tell you that. Here are the questions I would like people to think about when they're in the breakout groups. Is the author's response a faithful response to the current crisis? Are there any other faithful responses that you might be able to suggest, both as an individual and as a congregation? Has your faithful reaction to the events changed since mid-year last year? Many of us thought this was a short-term disruption to things, and it's much longer, and it's going to last a lot longer, and there's a lot more pain and suffering since that time. How has your reaction changed to it? Do you hold fears for the near future, or has your faith guarded you against, strengthened you against all the fears that you've had? And can you think of ways you might change your life post-pandemic? Those are a lot of questions. I don't think we'll get to them all, but that's what I would like people to think of. Lucy?
Nothing.
Okay.
Let's go.
So question of what's the response of people of faith to the issues that have come up in the past 11 months with COVID? So I'm going to put people back in the breakout rooms. If I can get the button to go, here we go.
We're back.
Welcome back. How about, does anybody have something that their group, that they'd like to share that their group brought up? You could speak up or wave or anything.
I would love to call on Roger because I loved your idea at the end that sort of arose from Kathy and from Nancy. So if you don't, Roger, could you talk about contagion?
Well, my comment was that if there is anything we've learned from the pandemic, it is how connected we are because it moves so quickly between people. But wouldn't it be wonderful if that same level of contagion, if the contact tracing was done because somebody said something good about somebody else, or somebody took an action that provided benefit to someone else?
I was optimistic in April and May that way. And then as the year went on, my optimism for that kind of waned a bit, but we'll have to see what happens when we open slowly in the spring, slowly into the summer. But I actually like what Chicago was doing. I thought Chicagoans are coming through for each other.
I mean, when I walk my dog, I'm typically a person that'll say good morning to people when I'm walking my dog. But many times it's just a nod or a smile or something like that. And wearing the mask has made me realize I can't depend on that to be a greeting. So I have to be more vocal, and that means that I have to be more intent and being more doing it with intent, even if people don't say it back, even if people look like they're gonna, tear your head off. It's really important for you to be the one to start it.
I say
Excellent.
good morning to those who are wearing masks. I do not say good morning if they're not wearing a mask.
We had a very good discussion, I think, in our group. And one of the things that we talked about was how this has been a period of self-reflection and a way of figuring out in your life what's really important, and maybe the things that you missed or took for granted or didn't know were there during other periods of life when we're also, busy and going about like normal things. Then we miss some things that are so obvious. So it was a period of growth and including for faith.
Like we talked about that as well, and I talked about it in a dual way, because I think because it's introspection for a lot of people, there's a lot of people that have gone down the wrong rabbit holes and have ended up being drawn in to some areas because they are so hungry, and they you know, we all know how cults work and how recruitment works for that kind of area. And so I think that that might have led also to some more division that we have. And hopefully the more of us that are looking to better ourselves spiritually and with each other wins out.
Sort of underscores community there again, in that if we're isolated, we are left to our own devices, and sometimes those devices take us places we shouldn't go. And we're propped up by the community.
Like the Capitol building.
Yeah. Yeah.
Places we shouldn't go.
Yeah.
I think those people were drawn in, you know, talk about the mob mentality or cult mentality, searching for connections in the wrong places. It's a great example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of fear. Fear was taken in different directions. So
I think Marilyn may have had something. Did you unmute because you wanted to say something, Marilyn? Okay.
Oh, I just wanted to pipe in that our group mostly focused on our feelings of heightened inequality in the citizens of Chicago, and particularly the minorities, and how it just amplified our feelings about you know, food and unemployment and medical care, and the inequalities between the north side, the south side, and the west side of Chicago. And we were talking about ways that we could, that the virus has just amplified this whole thing, and making us feel more frequently about how we can help our brothers and sisters. Not us, but the people that are really have been socked away by this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'll add, I think one of the things, because I was in Marilyn's conversation group, and Jim and Allison feedback back to the adult education group, I think that the classes that have been breaking out in small groups, I took the class on prayer, and then this one as well, I think we get to hear from each other what's important and what we're focused on, and we get to share what's going on in the church relevant to the topic. I also led an Artist Way group for Kenilworth Union Church, and 17 people that met for 3 months every week and had the kinds of conversations that built connection amongst people that didn't even know each other, or necessarily were not even in anywhere near the same zip codes. So I think it's interesting to me that, can we maintain some of the blessings, I guess, of Zoom in it bringing connection, and oftentimes there being opportunity for more substantive conversation and connection between people.
Yeah.
It was wonderful listening to Marilyn speak about what she has been doing on the mission committee at Fourth that I wouldn't have known about.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate what you just said, and also what Marilyn said. I really think that there are some very, very wonderful blessings that can come from this time that can be carried forward. And I really think that the article, even though she asked some really powerful questions about whether whether we will change, I really believe that we're nimble at Fourth. And one of the things that's hard about this congregation is its sheer size, and being, you know, even going to the coffee hour, you kind of stand there and talk to 6, 7 people. Well, it's a 5,500 member congregation, and to have this chance is really important. So thank you for that. I'll carry that into the reentry conversations that'll be happening over the next months.
And I think that the church is really important in that we all know that relationships take work. They just don't usually continue pretty much on their own, like democracy. So we need to be intentional about it. And I think obviously all of us having a connection to a church where some of that structure that would be helpful will come from.
Yep. Great.
Lucy, let's move on for our time here. So we're going to move on to the article about the 2 pastors from South Minneapolis at Holy Trinity Lutheran and their experiences in June during the riots in the south side of Minneapolis.
Yeah, so do you mind doing a quick screen share of the points?
Yep.
I'm just going to zip through really quickly and get us then back into some small groups again. Maybe the same one. I don't know how that works, but probably. Okay, so you want to go on to the next one. Okay, so it may seem like a discontinuous thing to be moving from COVID-19 over into talking about the responses to the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis, but actually I'm pretty convinced that there are lots of the same kind of questions that arise, both in terms of COVID-19 and the disproportionate infection rates among people of color, Black and brown people, particularly in this city. And also the questions of when you're in, this is a point that I really want to make. When we're in a time of deep discernment in our culture, when we're at a time when there is a lot coming at us, that we are really out of control in terms of particularly the pandemic and also racial equity and racial justice, and finding ourselves feeling very vulnerable. I am so convinced that as people of faith, those are moments when we really need to do a deep dive into what is God doing at this moment in time to empower people, to help us think in new ways and help us see our mission as a congregation in new ways. And so the reason, when I was looking, I literally went to Christian Century and was looking for some articles that might help us frame what will happen at the Michigan Avenue Forum. I thought that this one was interesting because we lived in Minnesota for 20 years. So I know the neighborhoods that these are happening. I know the Longfellow neighborhood. I don't know the pastors of the 2 pastors of this church, but I do think that sometimes you're placed in a particular geography and you find yourself in a whole new mission field that you had no idea was going to show up. So the point of it is religious communities never know what role they're going to take in a particular neighborhood. This particular congregation, they're very responsive to the issues that are in the neighborhood. I happen to know that Longfellow neighborhood, there are a lot of young adults that live in that neighborhood. It's an affordable area to live. So when I was the chaplain at McAllister College, which is over in St. Paul, a lot of our students would stay in the Twin Cities and move over into that neighborhood. And so this congregation, very responsive to what's happening in their neighborhood, and many in the community provided, in a response to this, provided the essential services when the neighborhood really came under literal fire. There were things burning. There were buildings that were burned. There was a lot of unfortunate looting and a lot of it's just the rage that was promulgated in that neighborhood. And yet I thought it was interesting in the article that the particular congregation church building and the low-income housing, affordable housing in the neighborhood were not targets. So I think it's fascinating there. And in a way, then they turned around and really opened their doors up in ways they didn't expect to do. Okay, I think there's a few more points. Pretty much what I just said about partnership in serving the community. Do you want to go back one, Jim, just for a second? Because I think this notion that they raised, which is a really powerful notion about lament, is one that I think we could really spend some time talking about, preaching about, praying about in not only at Fourth, but also within our culture. Because I think what tends to happen culturally is that when scary things emerge, we find ourselves vulnerable, we find ourselves out of control, that we don't often, and this is not a ding to anybody, I do it too. I don't take the time to go into that space of deep grief and uncertainty and what the biblical notion of lament. I don't know how many of you ever read Lamentations, which is one of the books of the Bible. And it really is a book that looks at the question of how do we stand with uncertainty and allow ourselves to feel the pain fully. And that's not a space that a lot of us want to go to. So I think it's really pretty important. Racial justice, certainly we are at a time too when the kind of convergence of the issues of COVID and the issues of racial justice were afoot through this year, given the way that the murder of George Floyd and then all of the remember and all the things going forward, have been powerful reminders that we have not fully dealt with the issues of racial justice. And I have to say that for me, I am very, very hopeful about our work as a congregation in this arena. We are as program staff, as the staff, we're working on these questions, and I'm very excited about how this will move forward. But I do think that the great quote from Frederick Douglass, where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where I don't like reading screens, but I will for a moment, where ignorance prevails, where any one class is made to feel society is organized, an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and denigrate them, neither persons nor properties will be safe. We saw that not only with the racial justice questions, but other issues of the last week. So what I'd like to do now is to have Jim put us back into some small groups. Here are the questions that we'd like to have you consider. You do not have to, we don't have these for you in a form, but whatever pulls up for you is important. The role of the church in addressing racial, social, God's justice. And what's the scale of that? If you would, I would encourage you to think about the question of lament, which I think is a powerful theological question and one for our day. And then also on the other side of that, the role of hope. And it's not, is it a very bland word or is it a powerful absolute? So, and where does it show up for you? So.
Okay, about 6 minutes again, and we'll come back. Bye-bye.
So what came up in your groups in this conversation? I suspect if it's like our group that there were some things that got carried forward from the other one into this. They weren't disparate, but would anybody be willing to share a little bit about what your group said? Yeah.
Our group, I think we kind of skipped over lament altogether. And one of the things that I always love is Romans, where he talks about we have to sort of, be happy for our suffering, because sufferings promote endurance, character, and character brings out hope. And with hope, anything is possible. So we kind of focused on hope a lot, and talked about different ways that our church is already doing that and how going forward. Alan, you can take it from there, being more intentional.
Well, just we need to be more intentional about the relationships that we form with groups on the south and west sides, because sitting in our little Gold Coast neighborhood, it's we need more connections where the action is, the west and south sides, and we're doing that, but we need to get into that more deep. Thank
you, Ellen, and yeah, thank you for the reflection. I think again with our strategic directions, which sounds kind of bold as a response, but the truth of the matter is that deep, the idea of partnership and also aligned with racial equity and justice. That's a kind of convergence that really provides a way in. But how do we do that?
Well, and having Joe responsible for building and fostering those relationships is a great step forward.
Thank you. Yeah, Joe Morrow, and part of his job description, but also his passion is Chicago and the work that we do. And we don't put it all on him. We need to be a
Right. We
part
gotta
of
support him. Yeah, we
I
gotta
didn't
support
hear
him.
that, but yeah.
Yeah.
So what else? What else came out of your groups related to this?
We didn't talk about this in our group, but something you just said made me think about it. How can we engage more with our brothers and sisters in other parts of the city? And I have seen a little bit of that through activities of the Presbytery. The women of the Presbytery had a retreat and we were able to join in that, and I would like to see more of that because those churches are very involved in the Presbytery, perhaps even more than we are. So look for opportunities to engage through the Presbytery.
Thank you, Colleen. That's really helpful reminder that we are a connectional church, and also to partner not only with organizations and nonprofits, but also our colleagues across other Presbyterians in the city. Right. What else came out? I'd love to hear anybody else that has a reflection on this. And I see only half the screen, so there are those of you that, yeah, just jump in, please.
Well, I'll jump in again if you want. I don't want to talk too much, but so our group, I think, related to the last speaker in a way, really, is that, you know, in addition to activism and interventionism being appropriate, I think we talked about there needing to be an understanding first about our white privilege and a recognition about the fact that our experience is so, an understanding that our experience is very different, and there's still a lot of work for us all to do in that regard to really fully appreciate the different lives that we lead. And, you know, at the same time, maybe as you're being activist and interventionist, in order probably to make that really genuine and authentic, we need to be reflective about the experiences that we've had and how we've gotten there so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, exactly. I think, and to realize that we are a diverse congregation too. And so the partnerships that we create within our congregation in terms of learning from one another and being open to listening to one another deeply, in terms of all of the experience that we bring, our racial backgrounds and all of it's really important. Well, you know, I think that the other reason that I was really interested in that article is just kind of the obvious one, that we're sitting on the corner of Michigan Avenue and Chestnut, Delaware, across, you know, where we're sitting, and to recognize too that we sit here in a very visible role, in a very visible place physically, and we never know what God is going to ask us to do in terms of being present to the community that we're literally sitting in, as well as the partnerships beyond this location. So it's an interesting question. It's just interesting to see how a little congregation up there, a little Lutheran congregation up there in Minnesota, really opened the way for some pretty magnificent engagement, I think. So I think we're coming to the end of our time, and I wanted to just quickly take a pass to the third article, which you may have found to be a little bit random, the Billy Graham Barack Obama one, but I think it really leads in some ways right into the Michigan Avenue Forum that'll happen on Thursday evening. Because like many of you, I grew up at a time when we were waiting for sort of famous people, famous pastoral type people, or Jewish leaders, the Abraham Joshua Heschel's, people like that, to make statements on our behalf that we could all stand by. And we wait for Shannon to preach on Sundays and to give us a word for our lives that is large and robust, and also thinking beyond probably, where I can say there are Sundays when what she says just sort of, kind of, oh, I hadn't thought of that, or whoa, that's a powerful word for me right now. But I think it's an interesting reality in so far as we will be listening to the voices of 5 religious leaders in Chicago on Thursday evening. And as part of the word that we may hear from those leaders, we also recognize that what Billy Graham said is probably really true in that article, which was really around saying, someone said, well, who's going to be the next Billy Graham and the next, in the next generation? And you can take issue with Billy Graham's message or whatever you want, but he was a very, very powerful voice that was tapped at moments like 9/11 to make, to be a comfort, a pastoral comfort, but also to be a prophetic word. So who's going to be the next Billy Graham? And I thought his word was really powerful to say, everybody in this room today holds that responsibility in some ways to be able to speak a word. And, as Presbyterians, we rely on the word. We are the priesthood of all believers. If you're a believer, you're a priest, and you're standing in the world as someone who can speak a word in whatever way that shows up for you, guided by God's Spirit, to be able to speak in these times. So I hope that feels like an empowerment and a recognition that we wait for those voices, and sometimes the voice is ours, to speak out. So I want you to go into this day and into this moment. I feel like I'm giving a benediction, which I am, to go into this day and this moment with that sense of guidance and presence and trust that God is working through your life to engage with the big issues and the daily tasks and life that you have been given. So very grateful to Jim for your guidance and support. We will be meeting again next week. We don't have it fully worked out what that's going to look like, but in response to what we hear on Thursday evening. So feel free to come back after Thursday evening Michigan Avenue Forum and join us again next week for some guided conversation about the way that that particular seminar will affect you, that particular lecture will affect you. So Jim, anything else? Would you mind if oh, Annette, did you have something, or are you just wiping your screen?
Annette, you gotta unmute.
Would you just say how we're going to the forum? Is it in Facebook? How do I get there?
How do you get there? You go on the church website.
Okay.
It is up on the website right now, how to do that, Annette. So if you
That's
go to
fine. Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Thank
no
you.
different than going to church.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be streaming like we stream the 11 o'clock service.
Thank you.
And I wanted to say too that we will not be opening it up for Q&A like we might if we were in person, only because of the time and also the format. But in some ways, next Sunday will be an opportunity if you carry some questions out of there and want to discuss those. We'll be very happy to open the way for you to be able to take issue or to ask questions or to raise concerns or raise hopes and guidance. Okay.
I think it'll be a really interesting thing next Sunday after Michigan Avenue Forum. Our brains will be full of bees talking about these things.
So Jim,
So,
would you close us with prayer then? Would you?
I will. I want to point out to people that we won't have Foundations of Faith today at 12:30. We're going to start again on next Sunday with Jeff Doan for the Bible study for Foundations of Faith. So we hope to see everybody at Michigan Avenue Forum and next Sunday here with our class. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together today to examine difficult issues that affect all our lives, that are as fresh as the day's headlines. Thank you for our chance to share with each other, to listen to each other, to feel your presence among us, and to feel the presence of the Holy Spirit with us. be with us in the coming week. Keep us in the palm of your hand. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
everybody.
you.
And we'll just
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Jim,
Bye.
Lucy?
Yeah.
How do I get, how do we get the articles that you emailed to everyone? We just jumped in last night.
Okay.
I didn't hear the question.
It was, how does she get the articles? I can pop those to you, Brenda. That's no problem. I
The Zoom invite contained them.
thought it did.
There were
And
links on the Zoom invite.
Okay.
And also the Academy page has them listed as links to go to Christian Century's website. So go to this class at the Academy page on the church website, and you can find them.
If you have
They're
any
really,
trouble, yeah, if you have any trouble, just pop a note to me and I can get them to you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so
they're
much.
really worth reading.
No problem. I thought they were helpful, I hope. Okay. Thanks all for being here.
Thank
Have a
you.
good, have a good day.
Bye.
Okay.
You, bye.
Thank you, Jim,
Thank you.
for all your work on this.
Yeah, great work, guys.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.